everyone. Welcome to the second episode of the Sleepwalkers podcast. We are your hosts, Chris and Ken.
Hello, how's it going?
And in this episode, we are talking about the secretive military base that is located in Dulce, New Mexico. Dulce is a supposed secret underground military base that works in conjunction with aliens and government personnel. There was an agreement between the aliens and the government where abductees were taken to this place and experimented on. We're expecting this to be a good episode. Hopefully, we get to touch into a lot of great topics. Ken's done his research here. He's ready to exploit all the mysteries of this place. So let's go ahead and get started. I'm going to give a little bit of a background about it, and then I'm going to give it over to Ken to share what he's got. So Dulce, New Mexico is a small community with about 3,000 residents, and it is home to the Jicarilla Apache Reservation. It is rumored to have a secret 7-story military facility known as the Dulce Base. Stories with the Dulce Base started with a state trooper by the name of Gabriel Valdez. In the 70s, he supposedly spotted a UFO and discovered multiple cattle mutilations. The state trooper also claimed to have discovered gas masks in the region, glow sticks, radar equipment, all which he believed belonged to the United States government. In 1979, Paul Schneider, an alleged contractor for the U.S. government and explosive expert, claimed to be involved in the construction of this underground base. He also goes on to claim that there was a gun battle that broke out between the soldiers in the base and the gray aliens that occurred in 1978. The details on this event vary depending on which media you're looking at, but the basic storyline is they were building the underground base. Soldiers discovered the aliens in one of the tunnels on the lower levels, which ultimately led to a firefight. Schneider also claims that during the firefight between the U.S. soldiers and aliens that he lost several fingers and received a radiation blast across his chest, and that a total of 60 civilians were killed. A total of 60 people. It is rumored that a few people were able to escape from this, and some of the survivors took evidence with them. This included photos, videotapes, and documents. This was later became known as the Dolce Papers, which contained lots of classified material, which provided evidence of human rights violations that were conducted on by the aliens. It is believed that there is several copies out there in the world, and only a few came into the public spotlight. However, there's still believed to be more. Obviously, copies were made and distributed amongst some of the survivors. And in 1995, Schneider gave a public presentation in which he provided details of the firefight that occurred between the soldiers and the alien entities. And he also claims that after this, a deal was struck between the United States government and these alien entities. It is rumored that each level of this 7-story complex is specifically designated for specific research, which ranges from mind control on human beings to genetic experiments where alien-human hybrids are designed. The 6th floor is supposed to be the worst of them all, as there is constant human screams heard by all personnel on the base. And this is also believed to be where all of the human abduction experiments are taken to. Schneider and others that share this same view also claim that the United States black budget of $50 to $80 billion is spent on this base, or has been spent on this base. If anybody doesn't know, it's rumored that the United States has a black budget that is money that is unaccountable by the US government. I have seen a Senate hearing where they were interviewing somebody from the finance department and asked them directly if they can account for the entire United States budget, and which they claim to know. So to me, this is pretty fascinating, and it also goes to show that there may be possibilities that bases just like Dulce exist, and they are possible locations where humans are experiments by aliens. It's, you hear about Area 51, which is a lot harder to hide because it has secret craft that they might be working on, whether they're alien technology or whether just top secret US military craft. Totally believe that there could be a underground base that has been kept secret, a lot better guarded secret, that has where all this black budget money is being spent on, and that's something that the public may never know. So this being said, I'm gonna pass it over to Ken. And Ken, what did you discover about this place?
Well, when you covered a lot of it, and I just wanted to kind of paint a picture of the landscape. So it's going to be a desert setting in northern New Mexico. The elevation is like 6,700 feet, so it's really up there. We're in Albuquerque. It's roughly like 200 miles from where we are. So I think it'd be really cool to check it out at some point. Yeah, so like you're saying, there's an underground base in Dulce. This started to become real public in the 80s. I think a lot of the focus was on this mesa called Archuleta Mesa. And underneath is where it's said to have that top secret genetic engineering facility. Experts were actually brought out to the mesa to see kind of the lay of the land. They wanted to look at the rock formations and to see if it was conducive for building such a big structure. And it turns out that it is, because the farther they went down the mesa, the rock changed. So if you're looking at it at the top, it would, look like it was a lot of loose rock. So you wouldn't really expect something like that to be in that area.
Yeah. So
they concluded that it is possible that there could be a huge structure under there. I don't know if this is solid facts, but there are a few different resources that said it was just under 5 miles in diameter. So it's huge.
Yeah.
And couldn't find anything about entrances or roads leading to the area, but I'm sure they're there. So yeah, it's very possible that there's multiple cave entrances, ways to get in and out.
And I read somewhere that a lot of the natives were native to the towns. I mean, there were natives there, but a lot of the locals were reporting at one point lots of U.S. military trucks entering this one road that led towards the mountain. This road was, I believe, guarded. Eventually, the road was boarded up, which leads to a lot of people believing that they might have closed it and moved the base, possibly because like in the 80s and 90s, this place got very popular. I believe you were talking about Benowitz, right? What'd you find out about him?
So basically that he started out as a scientist. He was receiving messages that he thought were, ETs on the other end. And it was supposed to be a top secret communication between the military and the extraterrestrials. So I want to say he was from this area. And then once he started to gain more intel, he like Dulce was mentioned in these transactions. So he started to go there, like a lot of people would that were interested, and trying to find out, really what was going on. And so the U.S. military was said to, you kind of touched on this too, that the ETs were sharing the base and they were doing all kinds of cruel experiments.
Yeah.
And one thing that was noted was in 1988, Benowitz wrote Project Beta, and I was explaining basically how to attack and expose the Dulce base. And I feel like he was doing this on his own at this point, but he was gaining more information, and there's kind of a reason for that. Yeah. So a lot of the authorities, wouldn't, and probably people that would hear about this stuff wouldn't take him seriously. He was actually committed a few different times to a mental institution. And I don't remember the guy's name, maybe you caught it, but there's a person, I think he was with the military, that was feeding him Benowitz stories intentionally. Richard to Doty. Make him, yeah, that's who it was. So he could he could get Benowitz more excited and put more stories in his head, and Benowitz would be getting into it more and more and more, and sounds like it kind of made him crazy.
Definitely.
And but Benowitz, he saw the orbs over Archuleta and around Archuleta Mesa, and a lot of flybys during the day that he thought were spacecrafts. But it's hard to say because it's a military base, so nobody really knows what's going on down there, I guess. They also talked about how he was probed on his arm multiple times, so it's kind of hard to explain that. Yeah, so he really believed that he was seeing and hearing all of this information about
Right.
Dulce. And some of the theories were that, well, when he died, I think it was in like 2003 or around there. When Benowitz died, he was said to take his own life. But it's also there's also a theory where he actually didn't die at all, and he was taken to the base, and he could still be alive.
That's an interesting one. I didn't hear about that one. That's a good one.
Yeah, so
Totally plausible, if you ask me.
yeah, I mean, it's like he was getting all this intel, and it really happened, and he knew too much, so he was removed one way or the other. But he hasn't been seen since then.
And just to piggyback on what you were saying is they were feeding him information to throw him off his trail. And
Yeah.
one thing that we were talking about last night is it's easy to disguise a lie with more truth
Hmm.
by feeding him more information, probably because he was onto something initially.
Hmm.
And when they discovered this, to backtrack a little bit here, Benowitz, like Ken mentioned, he was a businessman. He was also a scientist. He had a place right next to the Kirtland Air Force Base, and he, on one of his projects, believed that he was listening to traffic coming from what he believed to be alien UFOs. He went to the Air Force with this information for one reason or another. The Air Force decided to dispatch Richard Doty, which was part of the Special Investigations Unit, and began feeding Benowitz large amounts of information that were supposed to derail him or misinform him from what he initially discovered, which leads me to believe that he was onto something and he did discover something. Whether that was UFO, whether that was a secret project they were working on there, it's not clear. Obviously, we are never going to hear that information. Like Ken mentioned, it eventually drove him to mental institution. He was having mental breakdowns. There's something that I thought about as we were researching this, Ken, and it kind of made me wonder is several sources, and I'll get to these sources in a bit, where they all claim to have ties with this Dulce base. So if Richard Doty was trying to throw him off the trail, what would make him push Benowitz towards the Dulce storyline? So
Oh no, yeah, he must have. Benowitz must have been dead on about some of his findings.
I think he was. Like I said, I don't necessarily believe it. It may not have been anything paranormal or extraterrestrial or UFO related. It could have been secret projects that he just somehow was able to pick up with I believe he was like an inventor as well, and he invented a lot of projects, and I think that was the base of it, because I know I read somewhere that Benowitz's house was raided a lot, and I think Richard Doty used to feed him stories that the aliens were onto him, which I think really led to a mental breakdown. If somebody was telling me there was an alien invading my house, I would probably be having mental breakdowns too, or some type of mental scars or something like that. I'd definitely be more paranoid. But
Yeah, then when he would get out of the institution, he'd go back to his investigations, and then he would be, intentionally misled once again, and just to cycle over and over and over until he took his life, apparently.
Right.
Or disappeared, who knows?
Allegedly took his life, or like you mentioned, and that was something I never really considered, which is actually 100% believable, is maybe he either discovered something that was really what took him down, and they decided that it was just time to take him, Meaning
hmm
they, meaning like the U.S. government, or maybe simply they just thought he was too much of a liability. They decided it was time to, fake his death.
Yeah, maybe he started following the Project Beta attack manifesto or whatever he was working on, and actually went in there and never was able to get out too.
And that Richard Doty, the whole special branch that he was working for the U.S. Air Force, maybe it went farther than they anticipated. He did have a lot more information that may not necessarily all of it have been true, but there was a lot of his story in there that had some classified information in it, possibly with extraterrestrials, and that led to his disappearance, his death, whatever you want to call it, suicide, who knows.
I was just thinking, there were a lot of sightings of UFOs and lights at night, so something was definitely going on in the area.
That was prior to his mental breakdowns. That was when he first got into it. He was witnessing a lot of activity. So absolutely, those could have been legit, whether what you want to believe in, whether they're extraterrestrial or UFO in origin, we'll never know. And it's not just Benowitz. It wasn't just Schneider, and it wasn't just the U.S. trooper. I believe his name was Valdez. There was a lot of other prominent figures that claimed to have connections to the Dulce base. One of them was John Lear in May 1990. John Lear, he was a former pilot. He was an alleged government man and a self-proclaimed ufologist. He claimed to have 4 independent confirmations that a 7-story structure existed underneath Dulce, New Mexico. There was nothing that I could find on what type of confirmations they were, whether it was
Physical or
physical or some type of classified document that he may have seen or had possession of. It wasn't clear. If he did, that's either long gone or it just never made it to public light. Who knows? So Lear also goes on to share that there were different species of aliens inside the base, and the U.S. government did indeed strike a bargain for cooperation with the aliens. So this deal that we keep bringing up was a deal between the United States government and these gray aliens. And the terms were that the aliens were allowed to continue their experiments on the human species. This included not just human species, cattle mutilations, and crazy stories that happened on the 6th floor of this alleged 7-story secretive military base. And in exchange for this, the U.S. government received gray alien technology.
I saw some stuff on the cattle mutilations, some pictures of really precise circular cuts on the undersides. It's almost like things were taken out or maybe things were put in. Yeah, it was really strange. I mean, it wasn't just like crazy butcher, like blood everywhere. It was like minimal, I don't know the word I'm trying to say, but super, go ahead.
Like surgical grade cuts.
Yeah, that's what I'm trying to say.
And I love that you bring that up, because that was, I believe, in the 90s, early 2000s. I remember hearing about mutilations a lot.
In the 90s?
I said
cattle mutilations.
I think I said mutilations.
Yeah, you just heard that's fine.
I remember hearing a lot more stories about cattle mutilations in like the late 90s, early 2000s, possibly throughout the 90s. Recently, like the last, I want to say 15 to 20 years, I don't think I've ever heard a story about one recently.
Yeah, that's true.
It was a big thing, and it wasn't just the state trooper Valdez. I think there was a lot of highway patrol, state troopers, civilians, people coming across this a lot more often, a lot more frequently.
I wonder if that's because everybody has, technology in the forms of their phones at all times, so they can document anything at any time anymore.
Yeah.
And people can't get away with things as easy as, you can't just say something because people document it.
And we're walking recording devices ourselves, and everybody from old gramitas all the way down to little 5-year-olds have these phones that can record 720, 1080 HD with microphones that can pick up incredible sounds. It's amazing that, but like you're saying, like, to piggyback off what you're saying, I could totally see why there's not as much tomfoolery. The chances are of having that, having the wool pulled over people's eyes of maybe stuff that was faked, like crop circles or cattle mutilations. You don't see it as much because there are more devices that can capture people doing stuff, and that would easily give it away. Or to be the devil's advocate, that's exactly why it stopped, because alien entities realized that a lot more people had these technologies to capture them, so hence stopped them from making so many public appearances.
Yep, I agree with that.
So I wanted to go on to our next person that has claims to the Dulce base. Thomas Edwin Castello was a former Dulce Base security officer that claimed he served for the United States Air Force and was specifically in charge of the video network system of the entire underground complex. Castello claims that this gave him bird's eye view of the atrocities of what occurred inside the base. Castello would also claim that the base was connected via underground tunnels to the Kirtland Air Force Base, the Los Alamos National Laboratory, and to bases located in Arizona. You also have some people like former New Mexico Senator Harrison Schmitt and former NASA astronaut who claimed to have full disclosure of the underground facility. Schmitt claimed that he was one of 7 astronauts that were given a tour of the base. And in 1979, Schmitt held an animal mutilation conference in Albuquerque, where in this conference he alerted the public to these findings and their links to the U.S. government. And I wanted to unpack some of that a little bit. So Castello's claiming that there are underground tunnels that are linking the Dulce base to the Kirtland Air Force Base and many other bases, including a national laboratory, which I think is quite significant because I've heard many stories where there is underground tunnels linking stuff such as the Denver airport, the Kirtland Air Force Base, Los Alamos Labs, all the way up to California, even Area 51, that there are these underground tunnel network systems, which I think is, if that were true, that is quite amazing. And something.
Yeah. Remember when we were on a hunt and we were in Jemez and you were talking about that old metal bridge by the convenience store, sort of, that you said that you had heard of a cave that connected from that point to Santa Fe. Do you think that was like big enough for trucks to come through, or is that a smaller cave?
I'm trying to remember where we're talking about.
We were doing a hunt and I was going to take a picture of this old metal bridge, and you had heard if we went down this road that
Santa Fe.
Oh, is it Santa Fe?
It was in Pecos, yeah.
Oh, Pecos. I'm sorry.
Yeah. No, it's okay. No, that's actually a true story. And there's actually, if we would have went down that road, we would have been able to see that they had put bars over it, and it's supposed to link from right there in Pecos all the way underground to somewhere on the other side to Santa Fe.
Because that could, if it was big enough for trucks, that could take you another 20 miles to the east where people wouldn't be focusing on those entrances, and you could pop out there and nobody would have any idea if that was part of the network.
Absolutely no idea. I'm not sure how large that one was. I actually have family members that have claimed to have been inside of it, but like I said, they put bars on it. Maybe when we do go do that overnight there in that area, we can stop by and see if we can get some footage of it.
Yeah, that'd be worth it.
Definitely. Another thing that I thought was significant out of all this information was Schmitt claiming to be one of 7 astronauts that was given a tour of the base. We all know that a lot of former astronauts have gone on record to say that they have seen things in space that they cannot explain. And there's actually a lot of NASA footage, live feed, where the feed is cut, but right before it's cut, you can see what looks like some type of spacecraft in the background. So I thought that was pretty interesting that this was true, they would have gave them a tour of something like this.
You're not talking about space space trash people.
No,
Yeah.
you're talking about the top performers, NASA astronauts. You know, whether you believe what you want to believe about NASA, these are prominent figures that had the public eye, and they, they've made all sorts of claims. And I think we can get on that in its own episode itself. So,
Hmm.
so I wanted to take the time now and ask you, Ken, what you felt about this. Did you have any type of, what are your thoughts about it? Do you think this is something totally feasible, or is this something
Yeah.
that,
Well, I think it's possible. Like, we live in a state that has a lot of open land, a lot of reservation. So you don't, always venture off too far where you're not sure if you should be or not, because you don't want to go into any of the reservation land. Just the lay of the land, it lends itself for a lot of possible facilities like these, I guess. 'Cause this is kind of an unassuming state if you don't know about the military bases that are out here and stuff like that. So yeah, there's a lot of interesting things that happen in New Mexico. I don't know, there's just a lot of unanswered questions. And again, this is why this is really fun and interesting. It gives me things to think about, and we get to share a little bit with people and get them thinking, and maybe they've heard about it and it'll like spark an interest for them to look into it themselves, stuff like that.
Definitely. And historically, if you want to look at, I think what you're kind of hinting to there is historically New Mexico has a lot of magnificent things that has happened here. We had the first atom bomb testing happened in, I believe, White Sands. You have the whole area, the whole Roswell, New Mexico, where a supposed ship had crashed. You have this Dulce Base. You have a lot of local legends of paranormal things happening here. New Mexico is called the land of enchantment, I believe, for a reason. So absolutely, it has the potential to hold something like this. And we have, I think Carlsbad is the largest cave system in the southern United States or southwestern.
Yeah, I don't know. Like, I've heard about the Edgewood one that people don't know too much about. This could possibly be, the same size. I think when you get in the Midwest, they have bigger systems over there. But yeah, over here, this is the Carlsbad's the one over here.
So yeah, and do you want to kind of elaborate a little bit about that Edgewood one?
Yeah, actually, Jared, who's not with us tonight, I'm sure he'll be back, but he wasn't here tonight, but he's the one he lives near that town, and it's a really small town east of Albuquerque, so kind of central New Mexico, roughly. He told us a story about how his grandma used to hear about an entrance over near the interstate that led to this cave system that was supposed to be really big and not really explored at all. So I kind of looked into it a little bit. I mean, we might do a talk on this at some point, but I won't get too far into it. But it's supposed to be massive.
Okay.
People repelled like 120 feet down to get into it, so it's not accessible to like the average person.
Right.
And people don't know where the entrances are. But there's actually a video on YouTube. It's pretty old, but you can see people rappelling, and they have a map on there, and they ventured in like 3 miles and mapped out a lot of it. I don't know if that was like 15, 20 years back, but people haven't been in there since then. And that's how the story goes. So who knows what's going on over there.
And the reason I bring this up is just to share with everyone is, although caves are not unusual to the world, New Mexico seems to be filled with them. And it's entirely possible that we could have a 7-story complex inside one of our mountains, which is not unusual for us.
Yeah, because it sounds like the one in Edgewood, there's a whole community right above it.
Right.
And I've been here to almost 20 years, and I'd never heard anything about it. And I try to pay attention to this stuff because it's really fun to learn about. But
same.
Yeah, it's really strange because it's only like, just down the road or up the road a ways, and some huge mystery over there.
And I'm just trying to highlight the possibility that we could have a large mega structure inside something. Obviously, it's not going to be 7 stories deep, but the possibility that there was cavernous region and the United States saw this and were then began construction, creating a megastructure.
There's a lot of private land,
Yeah.
and nobody's
Yeah.
going to know what's going on there or who owns it.
This kind of leads me to like my own thoughts about this. Like I mentioned earlier, the natives and the locals have claimed to witness government vehicles coming and going to the base through via a road that was always like blocked off to the public. The natives and the locals also claim to have witnessed flying saucers that were coming and going from the mountain. And the fact that an Air Force official publicly claimed to have known Benowitz and fed him disinformation to throw him off his trail, to me is enough to give it this story credibility. There's also a couple documentaries out there that I had seen, and if I can find the names of them, I will go ahead and link them because they're fascinating, where they interviewed the locals of the area, which they claimed to have witnessed Bigfoot in the area several times, which, as you know, is kind of what we have a belief in Bigfoot, so it's our bread and butter a little bit. And as I mentioned previously, I believe that the base was the headquarters for all abducted human beings that were later tested on, and animal mutilations were a huge phenomenon that suddenly disappeared from the spotlight, or possibly just stopped altogether because either they got the information they needed, or as Ken mentioned, a lot more people had access to recording devices and they could have just stopped because it was an agreement with the U.S. government to, stop freaking our people out. Did you have anything you wanted to share with the class before we...
No, it's just like I keep saying, it's really interesting to come across these stories, and so far we're just doing ones in New Mexico, our state, but there's so much to learn about here.
Absolutely. And to kind of wrap up this episode, again, this is another incredible story. There are several people that claim that the base is real and that humans were experimented on while the U.S. government traded this for technology. Like many controversial United States bases in the United States, the Dulce complex is not officially recognized by the U.S. government. There are no official statements, documents that claim that the base even exists or existed. But could it be so hard to believe that the government would do such atrocities? We may never have full disclosure of this base or anything related. Maybe in the future, some official documents, pieces of information from officials may be acknowledged through possibly the Patriot Act or some other venture that some American has gone through, which would give credit to that the base existed, which may lend proof that human projects occurred at this site. So that's going to wrap it up for this episode for us. I just also wanted to thank everybody for listening. Please comment, please like. Anything you can do will help get this show out there to other sleepwalkers such as yourself. So don't forget to join us on our next episode, where we're going to be talking about the disappearance of the Solder children. Magnificent story that has the disappearance of a mysterious family, a lot of twists, a lot of unknown variables. That's going to be interesting for us. That's going to do it for us. This is your host, Chris and Ken.
Thanks for checking us out.
Thanks for checking us out, and we'll catch you next time. Thanks, guys.